Nomad for something precious. I've often heard that prison is a setback for revolutionaries because those who are really convinced of the need to change the existent radically, and act consequently, will sooner or later face ending up in jail. In fact, it's obvious that the enemy reacts by sharpening its knives when it faces a threat to its existence, even if the latter is a mere possibility. Phone tapping, following, intimidation, and any other kind of attention that the repression can bring about will become more and more concrete, and the cages of control will surround us. If we reckon that getting the situation under control is not enough to face the evil, then we will have to physically separate ourselves from the social context and the danger we think it involves. I think that, without falling into paranoia, this consideration must be always taken into account by all those who decide to undertake the many roads to their freedom and that of others. I'm convinced that nothing could be worse than finding ourselves quite unprepared when faced with the possible consequences of our actions, as though we were prey to a dream that suddenly crashes against the thick concrete walls of reality, leaving us unable to react. I don't mean that it is possible to be ready for everything that might happen to us in advance, but at least we have to think of hypothetical ways to react to certain situations in order to keep on cultivating and arming our desires and practices. I'm developing this argument because I had already thought about the eventuality of living in hiding before it knocked on my door. Of course, I didn't have any precise ideas about it, but it was in my mind as a possibility between controlled freedom, the one we experience when we are not locked up, and reclusion. I had consequently prepared myself concerning where to go and how to do it. I've never agreed with comrades who consider living in clandestinity as the worst thing that could ever happen to you. On the contrary, I've always instinctively perceived it as a stroke of luck and a chance to be grasped at once. I've never thought that this choice implied hiding oneself somewhere and feeling hunted down and deprived of all dignity or the will to act. And I've never thought that running away means escaping one's responsibilities. In this case, it was the judiciary that presented the bill, and I've never drawn up any contract with them. On the contrary, I think freedom is something precious that is worth defending at any price. I didn't consider living in hiding as something you decide without taking into consideration the conditions that go with it. The chance to put this choice to the test came to me at a time when I either had to accept it or face the bars of a prison. As for the unknown dimension of living in hiding, at first I only knew that it would allow me to move freely and look at the sky without seeing it through the contours of the prison bars. This thought, strengthened by the practical attention that I had dedicated to it in the past, was sufficient for me to decide to run away. If I had to say what living in hiding is like in a few words, I would say that it is like leaving without knowing your destination, for an unlimited amount of time and with a one-way ticket. It is therefore very different from the journeys we are used to. It is not a parenthesis between before and after, but is a life spent on the move. As I've always had a passion for nomadic ways of life, to such a point that I've always identified life with movement, that doesn't scare me. During my period in hiding, I've had the chance to reflect on the different attitudes and characters of human beings according to their sedentary or nomadic ways. When you are on the road, you meet travelers like yourself or people who are settled in a given place. I observed that certain friends I made wouldn't be able to go on living if they had to leave their homes. Those who don't like traveling inevitably become creatures of habit. Their days are spent in the same framework and they establish strong, deep, and permanent relationships, as only those that grow throughout the years can be. Their life goes on in a specific place, and there it takes form and content, and it would lose its meaning anywhere else. On the contrary, those whose nature is nomadic do not feel tied to one place. They adapt easily and immediately make the decision to leave again without any kind of impediment. It is a decision that has to be taken out of the blue because things could go wrong out of the blue as well. But let's come back to the idea of leaving without forgetting that this kind of departure is an imposition, as we are talking about the condition of being a bandit, i.e., someone who cannot come back. What you leave when you run away is a whole life composed of friendships, relationships, beloved landscapes, familiar sounds and smells, and things that you care a lot about. It is therefore everything that contributes to creating your identity, and that's no small thing. The nostalgia for what you've lost can turn into a pain, a continuous pain that can be so deep and lacerating that you cannot accept the present serenely. I felt this pain too. Sure I did, but I've always circumscribed it and limited it in time. And I got over it in the pleasure of being free and ready to experience life day by day and all that was going to happen. After all, as a person in hiding, you carry within yourself the sensation that you have nothing more to seek in your past and no certainty concerning the future. According to your character, this can either throw you into absolute frustration or make you feel dizzy at the thought that you are totally free from any links and able to become anybody or nobody. The choice is up to you. Paradoxically, I've often asked myself, what if it were precisely the condition of being clandestine that is the dimension of absolute freedom? To conclude, you need to be ready to travel light without your past. You have to be new and wear only your enthusiasm and the promise that you will never look back. So, someone on the run arrives somewhere. His or her first thought is to create another identity, which doesn't only mean inventing a name with which to introduce oneself. It also means that you need to create a concrete, plausible, and legal life in order to be able to make relationships and avoid raising doubts about yourself. You must therefore create a past that can be talked about, and a valid and credible reason for being in that place. You also need to respect the time and place that the latter requires, and pay attention to your looks so that they conform to your new identity. It is a real job that requires a good memory, time, and energy, and I have to say that it is not at all easy to act a part and get used to answering when you are called by your new name. It is not easy to talk about yourself, about your life and interests, especially when you'd always done that, as I used to, with your comrades and didn't need to give many explanations, maybe doing wrong sometimes. It is sad to pass for a collectionist of dreams when your greatest passion is to subvert the existent and struggle openly against authority and injustice. So once you have got over doubts and suspicion about your interlocutor, you find yourself talking about yourself by mixing truth and lies, real memories with imagination, and you have to bear in mind that you must remember what you have said and that it has to fit in with your new personality and identity. You must constantly weigh up your words and comments, and always hide the reactions that you normally have when you see certain things or hear certain kinds of news. In other words, you have to be extremely lucid all the time, and constantly keep the balance between who you are and how you are presenting yourself. I often found myself involved in conversations that left me exhausted from the huge effort I had to make to keep concentrating. In fact, no matter what discussion you get into, it will always reveal a part of you and your way of behaving with others. Moreover, when you meet someone particularly interesting and your relationship with him or her grows through time, it will be difficult to manage as you will find it hard to keep on playing your part and avoid being discovered. Obviously, you might feel quite uncomfortable at some point, as you know that you are deceiving the person you are dealing with, and that the latter will never know you for what you really are. Then you will feel nervous because even a simple invitation to dinner might put your friend in serious trouble. On the contrary, to sort out the problem of identity with the custodians of order is much easier. For the latter, the question is just a matter of looks. You only need to become one of the many, nothing more or less. Avoid going around during unusual hours and attending suspicious places, especially regularly. It is an effort of concentration, as I was saying before. It requires a state of lucidity that must be held for long periods. It is precisely absolute attention that you need in order to avoid enervating paranoia, endless doubts, and general stress. You can trust nothing other than your own attention to make sure that everything is okay and the situation is under control. You also need to look to your safety and make sure you are always free. If you are a person in hiding, a normal event might appear suspicious to your eyes. And it is true that the more you look at people with suspicion and insistence, the more you catch their attention. Suddenly it can seem that everybody is looking at you or that someone is following you. Then panic might come, and that is always difficult to cope with. The only way to get over this shocking state of mind, and you must know this very well, is by keeping your mind and nerves cool, sharpening your senses, and doubling your attention. Besides this, however, it is recommended that you keep your eyes wide open to what is happening around you. You have to learn to recognize faces, particularly the features of the people around you, in 1 second flat, to develop a photographic memory that allows you to recognize them at once, and so be able to spot a new face that might appear in the usual environment immediately. A clandestine person looks at the present through different eyes to those of people who are not in his or her condition, as he or she sees and fixes his or her attention on details that escape those who are not clandestine. I was the only one who saw that it was a police identification and that there were 2 cops standing there. As it is hard to keep this kind of tension for long, you need to have a place where you can go to relax. The most important place is undoubtedly the place where you spend the night. You must be sure that no one can come and find you there and that you really are alone once you close the door behind you. Then you find yourself with your books, your comments, your proposals, and free from your new identity. It is best that the people you meet never know the exact location of the place where you live. Your photos might appear in the newspapers next day, and anyway, the more people know where you live, the less you will feel safe in that house. If you have the impression that someone suspicious might have followed you and that your place is no longer safe, you will never be at peace until you leave it. In order to keep your place as long as possible, you shouldn't do your shopping or attend bars and public places in the surrounding area. Sooner or later, someone you know will see you going into your house. On the contrary, if you go to places far from your house and someone recognizes you, you will have time to go back home, pack your things, and leave. Packing is the activity I've undertaken most in clandestinity, as what you always need to achieve is the certainty that you are the only one who knows your secret. This awareness will give you the serenity to engage in any initiative whatsoever. If you used to have the impression that you never had enough time to cultivate your interests, when you are clandestine, time is the only thing you won't be short of. It is important, however, that you learn to quickly and event it. I often experience a sense of impotence. In fact, if you are living in hiding, news from your own country and comrades might reach you with months of delay, when it is too late to do anything. Furthermore, when it comes to moving away from somewhere, you need time for gathering information about routes and means of transport. You can't just do things at random. I don't mean that you have to forget where you're from. What you have to do is to look at it in a different way, by planning long-term projects and paying attention to the details that you didn't have time to do in your previous life, even if you knew they were important. Consider that as a person in hiding, you have the chance to intervene rapidly in situations that you didn't even know about before. I realized how deep-rooted my idea happened beyond the borders, as I was always busy in the many activities that life offers. When you change your perception of time, you also change the way you act. If you dedicate hours to a project and get to know all the details involved, then realize it, the time you spent in planning it comes back to you and gives more significance to every minute. Your sensations are amplified by the total tension of your whole being and what you are doing. It is a lucid awareness that keeps you away from the distracting business of the people around you at that time. I've reached the torrent after hours spent in a train, then walking. It is hot and I can feel my shirt wet with sweat under my rucksack. No one followed my steps along the road and through this little valley, which means that still nobody knows who I am, where I am going, or what I am doing. I walk along by the river, looking for a spot where I can stop and free myself from the weight on my back and relax. I soon get the chance. There is a large, clear pool of water surrounded by stones, and a little further on there is some shade under a few trees. This is the place. I get rid of my rucksack, and soon my lungs fill with air. I take a couple of deep breaths and am full of energy once again. I have a quick look around and I realize that I really am alone. I get into the water step by step without hesitating and reach the middle of the pool. I plunge in and abandon myself to this embrace with my face pointing to the sky. I am enveloped in a strong sensation of freedom. At the same time, I feel I am part of the totality and free from any ties. Soon my thoughts go to those locked up in jail who can't enjoy any of this. Of course, it is hard for me, but nothing will make me turn back. Moments like this and the sensations they fill me with are sufficient to forget any tiredness. They are the oxygen that keeps me going. I try to fix this moment inside myself, my closed eyes turned towards the sun. Now, in whatever part of the world, I am free.